Hey listeners, welcome back to the Svendsen. In this episode, Joey talks to Steve McAllister in what was an exclusive episode released to bad Christian supporters back in the winter of 19. Now it's everyone's to enjoy as they dialogue about the unfortunate dominance of male-centric culture, how people, including Christians, suck at monogamy, the grave concern of corrupt governmental systems, and Steve's book, Money, Sex, Power, and Faith. This one is a doozy and will surely get you listening and thinking. Thanks for listening. Also, Svendsen audience, please continue to pray for Joey as he is definitely battling depression and he's persevering, but he definitely needs your prayers. Enjoy the episode.
What is a BC Club? I hope everybody's doing well. I'm bringing you another Joey BC Club episode. It's got that Pastor with No Answers vibe, but Pastor with No Answers is dead. I shot him in the head, and now you get the pastor with all the answers. Welcome to the Svendsen, and we are talking to Steve McAllister, author of Money, Sex, Power, and Faith, a deep and historical multicultural tour de force that sheds light on who we are as humans and what we have become as a result of our pursuit of wealth and power. Very interesting conversation, and I will let you know that you can go to Stevemc.xyz, that's Stevemc.xyz, and download this book for free. You just got to get on his mailing list. But I do feel sure that after hearing this conversation, some of you will want to dig a little deeper into this conversation, which I found very intriguing. So I hope you enjoy. God bless and God speed. And if you don't believe in God, then guys, bless and speed. Peace. All right, well, we are here with Steve McAllister. And every now and then we have people reach out to us, tell us a little bit about their book or project or what's going on. And Steve, I'm going to unfortunately say that we weed out maybe 80% of these, and then sometimes things catch our eye. So I guess fortunately for you, until you do some research and you realize just how little of a deal bad Christian is. But the stuff that you wrote just on your promo is super interesting. So before we even proceed, I think for our listeners' sake, let's get a framework of McAllister, because what people are going to do to you, Steve, is basically size you up depending on your answer to these questions, and people are going to have a nice little summary of who you are as a person and all of that stuff. So let's just get that done right up at the top, and so people won't make stuff up in their head. They can hear the facts. So do you consider yourself evangelical, or are you even a Christian, atheist? Like, what's your position? What's kind of your foundational spiritual lenses?
That's a good question. I started out, younger as a Lutheran. I was raised in Lutheran church, and I started going to Evangelical Baptist school in 6th grade, and then got really involved in the church and in the youth group, and through about college. And toward the end, in my early 20s, I was finding that Christianity was making me hate people. It wasn't really fulfilling me with the joy that I was promised. The worship and the times that I participated in that, but I felt that something was missing in Christianity. And so in the mid-20s, I kind of, abandoned it and said, I can't really exist with all these beliefs that are being put on me. And so since then, it's kind of been as I was talking to somebody this morning, a personal spiritual evolution, looking at different routes and different methodologies for spirituality and understanding God. But I've always had still a great affinity for Christ and what he shared through those red letters. And so I'd say, I'm largely probably a red letter Christian, but I still don't adhere to a lot of the doctrines that the church has bestowed on me.
Gotcha. I'd say that, gosh, you really nailed it. That's pretty much how I feel too. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I'm actually pastoring a location of Seacoast Church. Seacoast Church is totally evangelical Christian church mega church. And so I feel like sometimes a fish out of water. Now, what makes it a workable exception is I've been at this church now for pushing 20 years. So these people know me really well, and they know that I'm honestly approaching things. They know, like you said, I follow Jesus and all that sort of thing. But I think a lot of times, unfortunately, folks like you and I are kind of casted off to the side because we're dangerous. I mean, and that's what's so crazy is this time 10 years ago, I would have looked at your book, I would have read the back of it, and I would have been like, I mean, seriously, I'll this will sound really extreme, but obviously I wouldn't have these exact words in my head, but pretty much I would size you up. I'd look at the back and I'd be like, man, it's unfortunate this guy's leading people to hell. And it's unfortunate that if this guy doesn't turn some things around, he's on the way too, because there's some crazy things you're questioning. Like, you can't have questions. Are you kidding me? You can't have questions in the church. So anyway, I tell you what, why don't you give us a snapshot? One thing that I loved that I think it's a subtitle of your book, it's Questioning the Building Block of Civilization. And that right there has my interest. I kind of think that's kind of what I'm doing right now, maybe more from a spiritual aspect, but I would imagine this is very spiritually loaded. So what does that mean? Why do we need to be questioning the building block of civilization?
Well, the title of the book is Money, Sex, Power, and Faith.
Yep.
And those four things are the building blocks of our civilization. And the book came about a few years ago. I was called to attempt to live a year without using money. And so after the end of that year and just opening myself up to the community and the greater abundance in the world and what God had to provide, I came to question, how long have we really been using money? And how do we get to this point where we're so addicted to it, where it seems like every service that we have to offer that it used to be just kind of shared in the community and freely given, now commoditized. We have to charge for everything. And so I started questioning that and started looking at how, over the last 10,000 years or so, when we first started using money, how that was really tied into our ideas on sex, as far as, putting the female on the bottom rung of things and as a lesser part of our species, while all the men were in charge of everything, where God was now seen as a man instead of a goddess, as she was in years previous. And then looking at the hierarchies were created through that, and how that was kind of developed through the church and creating basically sheep that would follow along and just do as they were told and accept the beliefs that they were told to accept. And
so let me nail this down a little bit. So you're making a connection with, and I'll say biblical, traditional male and female husband and wife roles as connected to money?
In large part, sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Just slavery. We have an idea of marriage now as a sweet and lovely romantic thing, but that ideology didn't really start until like the Renaissance period. Before that, women were largely just property, and father would sell off his daughter for a piece of land or something like that. And, it was a much different way of looking at marriage than we do now. It's not necessarily healthy. I think we're coming to the point now where women are getting more of a voice and realizing, they're not a lesser species. They're an equal part of this union. Which I think is in the Bible. When you think about why in the story of how Adam created Eve, he created her from his rib, not his foot to be below him or his head to be above him, but the rib. There's an equal there. But I think we're finally getting to the point too. But the way the Bible has written it, where man begat another man and man begat another man, it talks about the woman who carried this thing for 9 months and went through the process. So left them out of the story in large part, and I think they're gaining their voice now.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to make a deal with you. I promise that I'll let you say anything about this book. Make sure you plug everything exactly how you want to plug it. If you let me just go anywhere with this conversation, because you got me interested in so many things. Is that a deal? Like if I go off track, a little off topic of your book, I'll circle back around. But I got to ask some questions. So, what do you like? Do you feel like I watched this special on Netflix's and it was on monogamy and just the history of monogamy and everything. So when you say the traditional setup of marriage isn't really workable, are you talking about marriage in general should be abandoned, or the traditional wife and husband roles that the Bible seems to support and put out there?
I don't think it should be abandoned at all. There are many people that I know who have healthy, strong marriages, and there's a lot to be said for finding that lifetime partner to be that close with and that intimate. So absolutely, I'm not against marriage by any stretch of the imagination. I just have to look at it pragmatically and say, is that the only way? We have a tendency to find the one way, and it's the only way, and everybody has to accept that way, when in reality, there are a variety of ways to do things. I just think we need to start recognizing, well, there are people who, want to be monogamists. We have, unfortunately, become largely serial monogamists in our culture right now. 50% of first marriages end in divorce, and I think about 60 or 70% of second marriages end in divorce. And so we're not all that good at monogamy, even though we're striving for that, just like in some of your book, and how, we try to be good people and try to do good things, but it doesn't always work out that way because we live in a largely imperfect world, and we have to how it is. And so I think, if you want to get married and you find that person and that's important to you, then by all means, you should be able to get married. But if you're also a person who wants to have a polyamorous relationship and have multiple people that you have intimate relationships with, well, then, that's your prerogative as well. I don't think there needs to be a dictate on there's only one way you can have an intimate relationship.
Awesome. And so when you so we're kind of going back to some foundational questions that are still pertinent to what you just said. When you look at the Bible, do you see it as very possible that a lot of things were recorded incorrectly, Jesus's words recorded incorrectly? Do you believe like in an inerrant approach to the Bible, like everything is perfect as is, but we're reading it wrong, or how does McAllister approach the Bible? In 10 seconds, please.
I don't want this to rub you the wrong way, but I know that I was taught to believe that it's infallible, but I think it's one of the most fallible books ever compiled by man. I mean, there's only 4 books that are about Jesus's life when there was well over 100 different accounts of them. But when the church whittled it down, they said, nope, you only get these 4. You get 13 from Paul, but only 4 for Christ. And I know that there were a lot of other accounts of Thomas and Mary Magdalene and the Apocalypse of Peter and other books that are written about his conversations and what he did and his miracles, and they've been left out. And so I don't look at the Bible as that supreme ultimate thing. I say, it was compiled by men. Athanasius of Alexandria was the first guy to write out, these are the books that should be ordained in 362 AD. He wrote that down, and then it wasn't 2 months till two centuries later where the Pope finally signed off on that and said, okay, here's what we're going to stick with. So that was very much a man-made decision. And I think, we've just gotten very caught up in making that the word of God, instead of looking to Christ as the word of God, as the Bible actually says. And I see the Bible as a finger pointing to the moon, but it's not the moon itself. I know that's longer than 10 seconds, but
no, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So when someone approaches Paul's letters, for instance, should we read that as a critical thinking Christian should hear a sermon? Like most Christians would listen to a pastor and say, well, he's fallible. We need to check what he's saying, really think it through. Let's don't take this hook, line, and sinker. He's also a person. Is that how we should read Paul's letters as well? Like there's some good stuff in there, but be careful.
Oh, absolutely. And Paul says so himself. If you take all of Paul's letters as a whole, and you recognize that in one of those, I forget where it was, I think it was maybe in James, but he says, this is just my opinion, but I think it's better for a man not to marry. Getting back to the marriage thing. That was his opinion. Just spend your life serving the Lord. And then he would put that in there, just kind of like quantifies the rest of it and says, well, you know what? A lot of this is his opinion. And he's just another human being. And we know how fallible a person was. He was the coast boy at Stephen's martyrdom. So we know that, he was a radical on one side. And even after he might have had this experience, he was still pretty radical on the other side as well. And so, look at it and take what you can from it. But I mean, all we really need is largely putting out those red letters if you can really get deeply into them. And I think Paul echoes that. And unfortunately, I think the church has put way too much emphasis on Paul and not enough on Christ.
Okay, gotcha. So one more question about that, and we'll get super specific, then we'll get broader again. But one thing that always pops into my mind, then, and if I'm hearing you correctly, would you consider yourself a universalist, that God takes care of everybody, everybody's fine? Like at the end of the day, things are gonna be okay because God's got it.
Ultimately, now that doesn't mean necessarily that everybody's going to be okay, because we're still at a point where we live in this reality where we very much embrace the idea of evil,
Yeah.
and other people. And, when the Bible says that Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, it was because they chewed on the knowledge of good and evil. And I think that still resonates with a lot of us. And we don't appreciate our lives as much as we could. And so we draw more of that to ourselves.
Right. But eventually, I guess is what I'm saying, like nobody's going to be roasting in hell forever. You would imagine that Jesus wins it for everybody.
I think that's largely a misinterpretation. I mean, the idea that is the foundation of Christianity, which is kind of unfortunate, but the idea that God didn't have the foresight to see that the vast majority of these humans that he created and loved so much would have to burn in hell for all of eternity, and that he didn't see that coming. I don't think it really says much about God, but it's hell as that separation from God, and not realizing that he is always flowing through us. He's given us every single breath we've ever breathed, every sight we've ever seen, everything we've ever heard. Everything we know of his life is given to us by God. Where we miss out on the eternal life is where we get caught up in our egos and our past and our futures and our concerns and our basically knowledge of evil all around us, instead of embracing the original way things were created and that they were good.
Yeah.
That's what the first chapter of Genesis says, is when he created everything, including man, it was good. It wasn't until we took on that knowledge of good and evil that we started kind of getting out of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the specific question, and just so you know, to dispel any mystery, everything you're saying resonates. I don't necessarily 100% agree, but I'm not trying to back you up into a corner. Everything you're saying is honestly like cool water being poured over me. I love this. But when Jesus talks specifically about sheeps and goats, for instance, what the heck is he talking about if there isn't like these two places that people go to? I mean, who's he separating them by? I mean, what's going on here?
See, I don't know. I think it's in that day of judgment. That could be the day it's right now. It could be an afterlife kind of thing. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like that honesty, man. We need more of that. We need less BS and more truth. All right, so let's focus on your book here. I watched a little video and then I read about your book, but I haven't read the book yet. But it definitely is going to make its way on my list of books to read. So, would you promote like what should America specifically do? If somehow you could get your book in the hands of every single American, and let's just say every single one of them closed that book and said, man, that's the best book I ever read, we got to do what this guy says, then what does America look like in 10 years if everybody does what you put out in your book?
Largely, that's a good question. It's a full question.
Yeah. Well, and let me maybe this will give you a chance to get your thoughts together too. I want to be very complimentary. I like one thing that you had in your video that was just so interesting is how the church has leaned so much into masculinity that we actually see the effects of that worldwide with wars and violence and how governments are run. That is a crazy thought. Like I seriously thought about it and I was like, what if 50% of governing officials were women? I mean, the world would look different. I mean, I think I would love to make the argument that there would be less wars, but it would, I don't know if that's true or not. It would definitely look different though, right? I mean, that's a really cool thought.
And, and I think that we're coming into that place, and so my job isn't really to convince anyone. I don't need you to agree with anything that I say. I'm just reporting the facts on what I've found out in my 47 years on being on this planet and what God has kind of shown me and led me to. But I see this is just what's happening around me. So I look at the past and try to report what I see there and look at where we are now. See us coming into a point and getting more. I think I'd like to see us get more in touch with nature again. Realize that we're part of nature. We're not separate from it. Just like we're part of God. We're not separate from God. And we realize that. And so I kind of developed a way of looking at the world in the way that I want to. I'm starting to direct my financial flow and my financial energy, and recognize myself just like nature has its elements of water, air, earth, and fire, and human of heart, mind, body, and spirit. We participate in the world as artists, as businesses, as citizens, and as a community and charity. And so I want people to recognize that we're creating the art of our lives as we go along, and where we direct our energy, where we direct our attention. And I think in this time we're going through the technological advances that we have and how inundated we are with information and all the things that people tell us to do, it's important that we take our attention back and say, you know what, this is the world that we want to create. So where are we going to spend our energy on being the artists of our life and participating in our business and being good citizens, and make sure that we have the infrastructure to support everyone, and also reaching out to charity and making sure that as we walk around our neighborhoods, we never see anybody without home or without food or anything like that. But it's really taking stock in who we are. And I end the book of talking about how, when God met Moses in the burning bush, and throughout a variety of other spiritual traditions, God said, I am that I am. And that's really what a lot of other spiritual traditions believe, is that we are that what we are, and the question really we have to ask is, which I am I going to be? And are you going to be that conduit of love and peace, where there's strife? Are you going to bring compassion? What are you going to be? And I think we're coming to that point where women are rising up and saying, we need some leadership, because you boys keep playing with your guns all the time and shooting them.
Right.
Getting us in trouble. So we need a little common sense, because women are the have created wonderful homes for the last few thousand years. And when you get down to the word economia, which is what our economics is based on, it was about the economy of the household. And I think as women rise to their power, they're going to put things a little bit more in perspective and not let us go play with our guns as much, I hope.
Yeah. That's such a good thought, man. That's music to my ears. I mean, because I can't count the number of times where I have been going in one direction with like a situation in life, and my sweet wife has talked sense into me or given me a different perspective. It's like our household would be extremely unhealthy if it was just me. So why wouldn't that be the case with large organizations and all of that? All right. So good stuff, man. So if we take money, sex, power, and faith, the title of the book, like how are those connected, and how when I read that book from start to finish, what's your goal for me as an individual? Like what are some action steps, not belief oriented, like things that I can agree with you in, but what are some things that you would hope that I would start doing differently as an individual after reading your book?
Well, a lot of it, is I really want people to be knowledgeable about how we got to the point where we are, and be minded to the fact that we're continuing to innovate, continuing to change the world around us, and participate in what's going on in this civilization as co-creators. God has imbued us with the talents that we have, and the knowledge that we have, and the technology that we've developed. And it's really our goal at this point to be able to use those in a much more powerful way, instead of the forceful way that's often been done for us. We're at the first time in human history where we're remotely capable of actually having a true democracy. We like to call ourselves here.
Oh, that's true.
In the back here in America and say, "Oh, we're a democracy. We're a democracy." No, we're a republic. There's a big difference, but we continue to like to think we are somewhere we're not yet, and we're still evolving to that point. And so, part of me wants people to open up to the idea that we are coming into that, but we all actually, have to participate in that. And we need to allow for change and stop looking at man-made documents and technologies like the Constitution as scripture and as perfect, And it was just as fallible as any of us. Great guy, wonderful person. But we have to also recognize that he was dealing with a much different world, pretty much a completely different world in 1776 as we are here in 2019. And so we need to be able to open to adapt to that change. And I think a lot of it's going to have to do quite a bit of restructuring on the governmental level once we get to that point. And a lot of those things are currently underway, like using ranked choice voting and doing that kind of thing. I think, largely doing away with the two-party system is one of those things. This ridiculous notion. We have only these two parties in this melting pot of people. And when it gets down to it, both of those parties are just serving monetary interests. So to get some more parties in there and actual human beings in there to make those decisions for us.
Yeah. That's an interesting parallel that you didn't even mean to give just now when you talked about 1776 and how much the world has changed. Just think, if the world has changed that much in like 250 years, imagine how off we are reading the Bible that depicts thousands of years. And yet we try to read it as current information, baby, that, see what happened back in history. That's why we should do that. It's like, are you kidding me? So do you think that, would we be better off in America as like a communist country? Like, is that more up your alley, or what would that be a win if we change to?
Communism has been tried. It's been done. It's not a perfect system. We know that. Karl Marx had a lot of wisdom in what he said, and there's a lot of things that can be gleaned from that. But again, it's not scripture. I think that capitalism has its merits, socialism has its merits, and communism has its merits. We need to recognize that, yes, capital is a real thing. It's a very important thing. And a person's labor is one of his greatest capitals, as Adam Smith said. And, but community is also a real thing, and it's a very important thing. And we've kind of missed out on that because we have been so much about capitalism that we have left beside the fact that we actually live in communities and we live in a society.
Yeah.
But we're so afraid in America because it's been shoved down our throat to be afraid in America of communism and socialism. We had 2 Red Scares that made us petrified. And there's a lot of people.
Well, and Stalin killed a lot of people, that whole thing.
Done in the name of communism. And I'm not saying we have to do that, but we need to recognize that we also have to account for the fact, as much as we want to account for our capital, to recognize that we are also a community and also a society, and not be afraid to work together to create new systems that may be isms that we haven't created just yet that are coming into fruition, but be open to that and not be so closed-minded as to think that the world can be put down to either communism or capitalism.
Yeah.
We only get 2 choices, like we only can be Democrat or Republican. That's limited thinking, and that's that's the same problem that we had with kicked us out of the garden. It's either good or evil. That's all you get. Capitalism is good, so communism is evil, and that's really not intelligent thinking. So I would want people to think more about what's the next thing we're going to be, and not be so concerned about putting ourselves into a little category of participating in the world through democratic socialism or democratic whatever, but recognize the opportunities that we have right now to open up to a better way of living.
Yeah. Yeah. So how'd you go without money for a whole year? What did that look like?
Prayed a lot. No, I just opened myself up to what life had to offer, and I kind of put it out there. And I had an iPhone at the time, so I was still able to just connect to Wi-Fi and be able to use Facebook and email and text messaging through Google Voice and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was still, on grid, and just kind of put out there what I was doing and shared what I was doing through little videos, and life just provided. It just those things. I just put myself out there, and hey, I can help in these different avenues. And so I would have places where I could go stay and work on a house when they was doing some renovations and stuff, or provide security there. I would do pet sitting jobs where people were out of town. I'd go stay at their place there. Sometimes I'd just stay with a friend for a night or two. But it was just always something different. A lot of people usually ask me, how did you eat? And, I usually respond by saying I put food in my mouth and chewed and swallowed. How do you do it?
Right.
But I mean, it's provided through a lot of different things. You go to all kinds of events where there's food and people are there.
Right.
Invited over for dinner from different places. And I largely participated in the gleaning project here in Sarasota. Transition Sarasota started this thing, and this is a biblical practice of gleaning, where back in the day, it says, leave the portions around your gardens for the poor and the infirm and the old, and leave some food there for them and they can come clean it off. So what we do here, we go out to Jessica's organic farm, and all the extra produce they have that they couldn't sell, all the kale and the collard greens and the lettuce, we'd harvest all that and send it to our All Faith food bank. And that would be distributed to poorer folks around the county that were food insecure. And then before they would take the truck away, we'd be able to fill a grocery bag full of, it was fresh organic stuff. So, I could go do that on a Monday morning for a couple hours and go home and make myself salad all week. And so I was eating great.
Nice. Gosh, that's cool. Tell us about Home Free. And I kind of glanced through the website. You're intricately involved in Home Free, right? As an organization about ending homeless. Are you connected with people that do that or what?
Well, I got you, of course, very interested in helping the homeless situation because it's a big challenge here in Florida. And, practically being homeless for a while, I was able to see it much more intimately that way. And started working with different people in different endeavors. And the Home Free endeavor for me was kind of a documenting. I created this is just 12 parts of the documentary series of things that were going on in Sarasota to alleviate homelessness, and I told some of the homeless people's stories and what they were going through, and talked to different officials in the county and just kind of trying to put together something like that. And ultimately, I had high ideals and high ambitions, and my hope was to be able to tell the story of how Sarasota ends homelessness. Unfortunately, I think it might be the last city in the world to actually end it, though we're making some headway in different regards. But there's
didn't you hear the poor will always be with us? And Christians use that verse to kind of be a little lazy. They're always going to be here, dude. They're always going to.
That's all well and good, but but it doesn't mean that they have to be poverty stricken.
I totally know. Yeah, I was just joking.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's the capabilities that I see that we can have people be poor, but they don't need to be on the edge of survival. They don't need to be sleeping out on the streets. They don't need to be doing that. We have one homeless person for every 8 empty houses that we have in this country already. We're not at a loss for places to house people. We're just at a loss for how are we going to get them money to do that. And we have a very kind of deranged work ethic in our country because we want people to work for everything that they earn. But, we don't, at the beginning of the game of Monopoly, in order to get people to play, you got to give them $1,500, and so I love this idea of universal basic income thing, or doing something at least to ensure that everybody has their basic needs. When we're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, that first one is just, home, food, shelter, water, those kind of things, and if we aren't giving people the opportunity to fulfill those needs and using some of our excess to do that, then they're never going to be able to reach their esteem needs or their love and belongings needs or their self-actualization. So I think we need to look at ourselves as a better society and a stronger community and say, people don't need to suffer like this. Not when you've got, 82% of the profit we created going to 1% of the population. I think this whole billionaire phase is just remarkably unhealthy for us. And I think that's something we really need to address. So, it's great to see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez come and say, we need to tax these people who are making over $10 million a year and put some of that money back into circulation to make sure that we're not having people suffering just because other people want 4 or 5 yachts.
Right. Yeah, totally. Well, let's wrap it up here. At the end of your promo for your book, you said it's an exciting time to be alive. And I always want to ask people when they say that, like, why do you personally think it's an exciting time to be alive here in 2019, where a lot of people are saying things are falling apart?
Well, I think that destruction must precede creation. We in Sarasota here, we build a lot. That's one of our key industries is building. And before we build anything, we got to knock something down. And like right now, I know it's a terrible thing that people see that we have this guy who's, really just tearing down the government. It's not even been open for over a month. And see a lot of damage being done in that regard. But we're also given great capacities to make some amazing changes. And, personally, I'm looking at Marianne Williamson that's coming along. And I think she's the exact contrast of Trump. And so, I would love to see somebody like that be able to get into office. She's a woman and she's a spiritual woman and she's a strong leader. And I just see, like I said before, I think we're at first point in our civilization where we can actually create a democracy if we really want it. And we're given just a lot of great opportunities. So I see the potential for us being high if we can kind of let go of a lot of the limiting beliefs that we have and recognize that, yeah, God is providing for us and giving us all the talents and the skills and the knowledge that we need to do whatever it is that we see fit to do. And if we can open up to that and be willing servants and caretakers of ourselves and our planet and our community, then I think we can do some amazing things. So that's why I think it's a good time to be alive.
Awesome. Well, it seems as if you wrote an interesting book, and you definitely are an interesting conversationalist. So I appreciate your time. Point people to where they should go after hearing this to not only get your book, but also follow up with your endeavors.
Yeah, I have a website. It's Stevemc.xyz. And if you're interested in reading the book, but you're a little short on cash, if you can't afford the $15 on Amazon or $9 for an ebook, you can go and you sign up for my newsletter to find out more about what I'm doing, and you can get a free PDF of the whole book. So you can read the whole thing for free. I hope it'll be a monetary creator, but I also just want people to read the book. And if you have any comments or arguments with me, then I'm more than willing to accept them. But go to the website, stevemc.xyz, read some of what I've gotten there. I've put quite a bit of the book out on the website as well. And let's follow up later on.
Awesome. So good, man. Thanks, Steve, so much. This was a great conversation.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right.